Hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm here with Brent Alvey of Complete Canine Care and Fallen Star Bloodlines. So, Brent is a trainer. You are what? A national levels IGP helper, and you're also a breeder of Malinois. So, we're going to get into all of that. Brent is also a friend of mine. We've known each other now for what? About probably, I guess we've been working together for about 5 years. And then
Yeah,
uh,
been a while.
I think I met you probably about 8 years ago at a seminar, and we'll get into that because I want to talk about my first meeting with your boy Rex.
I think I still have the video.
You sure do. Is there anything that I missed that people need to know about you before we kick off?
No, that's it. No, complete canine care is all of our main stuff, doing the behavior modification, obedience, and just everything with pets. And then our Fallen Star Bloodline is always our breeding program.
So today our conversation I think is gonna focus mainly on the breeding side of things. We've done if
Yep.
anybody's interested, we've done some training conversations in the past, some more kind of just general working dog conversations. We did a podcast a while back with Rod Petrovic of Viking Canine Canada as well. So there's some other stuff there if you guys are more interested in the training side of things. But today, for anybody who's really interested in breeding, I think that's what we want to focus on. Both Brent and I are working dog breeders, and that for me is our main focus. And for Brent, I know you're more focused sort of on the training side, and then you also have a big focus on the breeding as well. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is you like a different kind of dog. The dogs that I know that you've owned are not the typical dog that even your
No.
average working dog handler would own. So tell us a little bit to start out with about your preferred style of dog.
Yeah, absolutely. Where to start? For me, I like a dog that's gonna make you regret having him on some days when you're not up to it. I like a dog that's a little bit challenging, is strong character. So for me, I like a larger size Malinois, bigger body. So weight wise, it'd be the easiest way to describe, an 80 to 90 pound Mal that is athletic. You can't be a cow and not be able to jump. I want them to be able to do a 6 foot wall, such as in the KPV program, to do that in the long jump. I want them to be athletic, but I want a larger dog. I prefer more quote unquote a man stopper type dog. It's not for everyone. It's just what I personally like as a dog. I like a strong character, so a dog that's not always the most biddable, easiest to handle. The dog that you have to make sure you have to be fair with, and they understand the training with them. You really have to do it a certain way. Otherwise, if some people that I know can be a little heavy-handed, it doesn't go so well. Those dogs have the character to fight back if you're being unfair. So you have to be fair in your training, which in turn makes you a more skilled handler. As well as the big thing I like is a big grip. I like a dog that comes out naturally biting, very, very full, very, very hard, very, very strong pushing grips naturally. That's a characteristic I like. I like a dog that's confident everywhere it goes. So environmentally, slippery floors, stairs, dark, anything like that, I want it to feel very comfortable there. I want a good hunt drive. I want kind of everything that you'd want in we'll just say a police working dog. And of course, you're going to have variations of that. So if you're picking your own dog, you're going to have to do the plus and the minuses of each individual dog. But for me, that's just a very strong character dog. It's not always the best type of dog to make you look really, really good, like you know what you're doing. Because some of those dogs that are real biddable and you're just like, hey, don't do that. And they're like, okay, no problem. I'll never do that again. Those dogs you can really make good videos of and show how good you are for training and are probably the best high level sport. But for me, I've had some and I just get so bored. And I'm like, well, that was easy. What next, And I just like a dog with a little bit of spice to it. And I don't know why. But I just enjoy it. It gets me excited. You see them working and they have this, they go to 11, Most dogs that go to 10, they go to 11. They have this little extra gear, especially when there's more of a fight in the working dog aspect. They just turn up more in volume. They like it. And that's what I really like. And that's what I like to own. And that's what I look for in a breeding dog as well. Even if it's something I don't own because it's overseas, that's what I'd be looking for in a potential stud or female down the road.
So let's talk Rex for a second.
Yeah.
Rex being I guess you're kind of I'm not going to say first ever dog along those lines, but certainly the one that I guess got you better known, online, and the one that I came to know you as having. And Rex's son, Soul Leader. So for those of you who may have seen a previous podcast that we did with Rod, Soul Leader is being paired with, yeah, he's behind Brent right now. You can see his head poking out there in the picture behind Brent. Soul Leader is a son of Rex and has been paired with our girl Indy Van Tiekerhook, and that's going to be a mixed herder litter, which is Malinois German Shepherd cross. We'll get into that in a little bit as well, but just to keep it sort of in that line, let's talk Rex. And my first impression of you when I first met you, it was the first time that I'd ever put on a bite suit. Again, this is, I guess, going back 8 years now. Seminar put on by Haas at Shield Canine and Canine Mike Nesbitt from Grassroots Canine. You came along, you brought Rex with you, and I had never taken a leg bite before. I didn't even really know what a leg bite was at that point in time. And this whole seminar, we'd been taught, when the dog bites you, the way you mark the proper bite is by screaming. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got all this, information in my head about, okay, the dog's going to bite me, and I've got to remember to get my timing right on the screen. Well, it turns out that I didn't have to think about a thing, because the scream that came out of me was completely natural. And and as you said, it's on video. It's out there
Yeah.
somewhere. You might even still have it.
Yeah.
I
I would
can't
never let that go.
I can't say it's my proudest moment as a budding decoy. But I can say that after that I took dozens, probably hundreds of other bites from Rex, and it never hurt any less. But the surprise wasn't quite the same after that very first time. I kind of would describe Rex, and I have done before, as a tiger on a leash.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
but that being said, the thing that I found really interesting about him was that a lot of people would think about a dog like that is that aggressive and has that level of power, and would think of them as being kind of a chaotic nerve bag type of dog. And Rex was the exact opposite of that. He always struck me as being just workmanlike in his
Mm.
in his biting and in his work. He never came across, like, he was never a scary dog to work. He was always a dog that you kind of knew what he was going to do, and he was very clear in everything that he did, which I always found to be a very unique combination in a dog. So maybe tell us a bit about Rex and what it was like kind of learning how to handle a dog like that. You mentioned a little bit before about how you have to be fair in your training. Go into a bit of detail about maybe the consequences of not being fair in your training, where that plays in those bloodlines, because I do want to start getting into a little bit more about those specific KNPV bloodlines and where you find those.
Yeah, that's a lot to unravel there. So Rex was actually my first Mal. I have Kick-Ass, who's a Mal Bulldog mix, but Rex was my first Mal. And what I was doing was actually looking for a dog I could put to her eventually. But I was, it took me about a year or two looking everywhere to find a dog that, caught my attention. It just had a certain look about it, a certain way it worked, and I was looking and looking, and I was looking in Holland and whatnot from what I knew over there at the time. And nothing really stood out to me. I seen all those crazy KNPV stick attacks, and I'm like, that's cool, but I didn't have that extraness. And then I saw Rex one day, and I was like, that's the dog. That is the dog. You just see it and And so I originally wanted to breed him to Rex to try to get something in the future, and eventually I just asked if I could buy him. And the guy was like, yep. So we agreed on a price and everything. So I had a friend, Ian, come with me, and we drove down to the States to get him. And I didn't know dogs like this existed at the time. I got out of the car and we went down to the kennel where Rex was, and he was about 100, 200 feet away from us. And he looked at me and us, and he scared the shit out of me. Definitely made me do a double step back. I did a double step back and I was like, holy shit, what is that? I've never seen a dog.
You just hit on something really important there that I think people should keep in mind as we talk about this. Most people, and maybe a little different on this feed because we do have some more experienced working dog handlers, but the vast majority of pet owners don't know that dogs like this actually exist in the world.
I didn't know, that's for sure.
Blind spot. You were a working dog handler already and you didn't know, right? So,
Yeah.
anyway, sorry to interrupt, but I just think that's a really important thing for people to keep in mind.
Yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, I didn't know it existed, and I really haven't seen anything like that since. So I did a double step back. He just had this presence about him where, as a person, you could be, we'll say, for instance, like in a bar, and someone walks in, and you have your back to them, and you feel really uncomfortable that someone came in, and everyone's like gets quiet and uncomfortable, and that person doesn't say anything. They just have that presence or that aurora about them. And that's what he had, and I didn't know that that existed. And so I went down to the kennel and everything, and I'm like, look, I see this dog, and Rex is staring at me. He goes to one corner, stares at me, and he pisses in the corner while staring, and then he goes to the other corner and does the same. And I was like, oh damn. And the guy was with me. He's like, you don't have to get him. And I'm like, well, we've already driven this far. So we brought him, the handler, the owner at the time, brought him out, and I worked him and everything, and that was great. And we loaded him up, and I went home with him. So we had an interesting 24 hours. That's another story, waking up to him. Well, I'll tell the story. It's fun. So we got home. I had a couple hours of sleep, and I started letting some dogs out. And the crate I put Rex in apparently wasn't very good, because I heard a couple of my dogs bark, and I opened the door, and there was Rex standing in the hallway. And this dog I've only owned for a few hours, who scared the shit out of me the first time I saw him, was loose in the house, staring at me. And so I was like, lovely. And I shut the door, and I'm like, what do I do? I open the door again, and he looks at down the hall at me, and he just stares at me and goes, "Rrr." And then I was like, oh, that's lovely. And I shut the door, and I go, what do I do? And so I opened the door again, and I luckily read up on my Dutch commands, as he's a PH1 title dog from Holland. So I was like, I got to learn the Dutch commands.
So that's KNPV. That's the first level of KNPV.
Yeah, police dog 1. And so I told him to lie down a couple times, and then he lied down, looking at me a little suspiciously. He was like, okay. And then I walked past him, and I opened up the freezer where I had a bunch of treats for dogs, and I look over, and he's standing up looking in the freezer with me, and I just tossed him a treat, and it bounced off his nose, and he's like, "Rrr," growled at me again. I'm like, lovely. And so I walked down the stairs, and I managed to just pop a leash on his flat collar he had on him. And then I was like, hey, Rex, buddy, old pal, like, let's go in the crate. I'm trying to get that running speed to kind of like make it all one big flow. No big deal. And he just puts the brakes on every time. And a couple times walking past there, I had an IPO sleeve down there. The one I didn't use, I got it. It was as hard as a rock. Like, I would never use it. And for some reason, he smelt that, and he just, boom, grabbed the back barrel of it, where you don't bite, and just swallowed the whole thing with a full grip, and then was walking around. And I'm like, shit, is he like one of those dogs that goes into work mode and is like crazy now, becomes a little bit unstable because of previous training or something? And I was just like, hey, let's be friends. I was like, good boy, Rex. Good boy. You got that sleeve, buddy, old pal. And I asked him to out a couple times, and then I managed to get him in his crate. And I think that took a couple years off my life. And I'll never forget that. So that was my first experience with him on my own. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to go for a big walk after that. So that's how we started a relationship, was just, the first 2 weeks was just go for an hour walk every morning, just on his flat. I didn't even use any other collars. I just wanted to build a relationship with him. And he was a very, very fair dog. If you were being unfair, he would let you know. What
would he do to let you know? How would you know that you were being unfair?
Yeah. So the first couple times I was doing healing with him, and I'm used to more of the IGP heal versus in the KMBV heel can be a little bit loose comparison. And he was, not so straight and everything. And I didn't know enough about the sport at the time to know these rules. And so I went to correct him to make him a little straighter. And I just gave him a little bit of low stimulation, I think, on the e-collar, I think it was at the time. And he just looked at me. And I read that look loud and clear. And I said, okay, we're done training for the day. And we went for a walk. And for about 45 minutes of that walk, he was walking next to me and just was like, and kind of give me a look. And I was like, yep, I'm not going to pet you or anything. We're just going to walk and going to ignore you until you're happy. And about 45 minutes later, he calmed down. And, he let me know that we were cool again. So it was one of those things, if you didn't read the sign and you did it again, it might be bad. He might make you learn not to do that. And so you had to be fair in that kind of stuff. And I learned what to do and what not to do. And definitely getting a dog that's titled and was definitely, I later learned, was trained a different way than I was accustomed to. Had I known the way he was trained, I probably would have made life a little easier, but it was, again, just not a style that I was familiar with. I learned later on. So I learned with my own way, and I never got bit. We were always fine, but I definitely learned, like, there's dogs, you have a certain threshold, and if you push them, they will make you pay. And so you have to think a little bit differently, and you can't use force in that matter. Not that I was using force, but just you have to be fair and not do that down the road.
It's really interesting because, a lot of what we talk about from the training side is the ridiculousness of the whole force-free ideology and everything else.
Yeah.
And how they paint this caricature of those of us who use aversive tools as being just straight up yank and crank trainers who are just, trained with
Yeah.
pain and all this kind of stuff, right? And what I find really interesting is, like, with a dog like Rex, that's just not even an option. Like, you can't
Yeah.
do that. The dog will hurt you if you try doing
Yeah.
that. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's just it's such a clear indication of the fact that, like, the type of training that we do actually does work, because it allows you to build the relationship that you need with a dog like Rex. Like, you can't have that dog in your house if you don't have an actual two-way relationship with the dog. It's not him looking at you as being some dominant figure in his life. It's,
Mm.
he looks at you as a potential underling, who is currently in control, but doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, and with him is that, you had to be fair. And for him in his bloodline, which I learned later on, is definitely their characteristics are very, and again, these are the lines I use, are very one-man dog type dogs. So, the person that raised them from a young age up would probably have a foundation and be able to do something versus, the second owner that imported them could definitely have the upkeep, but things could definitely go, being let loose and let him a little bit more wild than he was being kept with his original owner. And then me getting him at 5, being the third owner, again, like, if I could do it over again, maybe I'd change some things, but we never had an issue. Our relationship was good. And he was a very, very fair dog. He had that aggression in the work. He wasn't a dog that was going to just go up to everyone and be pet. He wasn't that social. But if you gave him a little bit of time and he liked you, he would walk up and he could seek affection from someone else. As long as you were fair about it, he could definitely accept other people. But it had to be on his terms. It wasn't something that he would just be a social dog and go up to everyone. He looked at everyone and measured them up. At an APA/KMPV seminar I went to with him, and a gentleman then named Rick, who's been in Holland for 30 years at the top level dealing with these types of dogs, is like, yep, this is a dog that comes out and measures every single thing up out here and sees where the pecking order is, and he's above everything, and he measures everyone up and gives them that look. So yeah, that's to touch on Rex without rambling on for hours about him, is the type of dog he was and the character he was, and he taught me a lot, and a lot more on how to deal with a dog like that in the future, how I could do even better.
So let's talk about those bloodlines that you mentioned. So you got Rex down in the States, but he wasn't born there. He was a PH1. He got his PH1 overseas.
Mm-hmm.
And since buying Rex in the US, if I'm not mistaken, most of the mouths that you've ended up bringing in have been from Europe. And I think closer
Yep.
to probably Rex's actual breeder, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, about the bloodline, and then how you ended up building those relationships? I don't think people have a good sense of what it really takes to bring in these kind of dogs to Canada.
Yeah. So Rex's lines are, his mother was from Holland, his father was from Belgium. Every dog I brought in has since been from Belgium, except for Evo came in from Germany, but the father again was from Belgium. That's the Guardian bloodlines I use. So I've been following a friend of mine, Paul Sleeks, from there. He's been doing this for over 20 years, using these types of dogs. They have the certain look, that I mentioned before, the man stopper. So a larger dog with a big natural grip. They have natural aggression to them. They have that extra gear. So he's a gentleman that's been doing it for 20 years. And, I've fallen in love with this types of dog, especially after I got Rex. And I had a lot of people reach out that knew about these lines, but they're hidden in certain aspects and not a lot of people have them. And so I learned a lot about them, and that's all I want to go for. So, a lot of the dogs I brought in now are from this breeder in Belgium. And in importing a dog is, it's getting the dog's the cheapest part. It's all the transportation. It's thousands of dollars that you're paying and all these fees and hidden fees just to bring a dog over. So it's taken a while to acquire these lines and get the right kind of dogs for it. So primarily I'd say the lines I'm using would be from Belgium, so NVBK lines, but they do have KMBV in them. The gentleman's not using the FCI. They have to be FCI, and they have to be from this bloodline to use in the sport. But they're more of dogs that are just meant for real world applications. And then if there's a dog from Holland that can do that, then he's going to use them. Or if the dog's from Belgium, and he's going to use that. But basically, he's looking for the certain types of dog, and that's what I'm doing as well. Is I'm just looking for any dog that meets that criteria that I can use down the road. So I've got a few dogs collected from Europe that I think have the possibility of producing dogs similar to Rex. So I've collected those dogs, and I'll be doing that in the future as well if I ever see a dog that really is stand out, because finding them is few and far between. A lot of dogs that are sought after now, and I understand why, are very social. They can do the work, but they're very social, kind of like a happy-go-lucky Labrador, but can do bite work. And for me as a breeder, I'm always concerned that in 10 years, if we keep breeding that way, then they'll have no natural aggression, and they're not going to have any dogs that can do the real work, or at least breed offspring that can do real world applications that don't need proper training. A lot of these dogs, you can show them a scenario they've never seen before and they can do it. They don't need to be trained for every scenario and every which way. They're just able to do any work that you throw at them without proper, quote unquote training to show them all scenarios. They just do it all because they have that natural aggression and character and dominance to them to be able to do it.
I think the same concern exists in the German Shepherd world with regards to the overall softening of the breed. I think it's important to mention, with the type of bloodlines that you have, these aren't bloodlines that you're going to find AKC registered or CKC registered. These are. Tell me if I'm thinking about this the right way, because I'm honestly not sure that I am. But the way that I see it, I equate the breeders that breed these types of bloodlines more to bulldog breeders, where the pedigree is held with the breeder. There's less focus on purity,
Yeah,
where your bloodlines, there's German Shepherd in there, back there somewhere. There's Dutchie in there, back there
right.
somewhere. There's,
Definitely that too. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know if there's German Shepherd or not, but there's something other than Malinois in there because they're 90 pounds, 80 or 90 pounds. And so it's less about, in the German Shepherd world, there's a real purity, the desire for purity, I guess.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, to the detriment of the breed's working ability, I would argue.
Yeah.
On your side,
Absolutely.
there is less of that focus on purity, more of a focus on creating dogs that can do the job that they're needed for. And that is
Yes.
held more with the breeder than with any kennel club. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. For me, my goal in breeding is to have a litter and be happy enough that I would want to take something out of it personally for myself. That's my goal. And if people like the dogs I breed, you know, they're welcome to purchase one for it. But I'm not breeding for commercial breeding. I'm not breeding for the dog that's going to be easy to sell. I know my dogs can sometimes be a handful, but if people like that, they know where to come to get it. And it's more of a niche market, right? It's not as well sought after, and I understand that. But I'm breeding for myself, and definitely I'm not doing CKC. I'm not doing FCI. I don't want anyone telling me what I can and cannot do. I don't want to say that you must do this. You must do this. The dog must look a certain way. The dog must have a title to do this. Some dogs, you could get a title on them, but it's a hell of a lot of fucking work, and you need the right team to do it. And I don't have the right team to do it all the time. So I know what the dog's capable of. I can test the dog, and I know that it should be good for breeding. And that's what I'm looking for. I don't care about that paperwork. I think it's silly how it goes out there. I understand why it's there, but I don't like anyone telling me what to do. And that's just not going to happen. So
let's talk titles. You mentioned titles. I want to just get into that a bit because it sort of plays in a bit with the structures that exist in the purebred world. So on the German Shepherd side, again, back to that purity test, it's very much a, if the male's not IGP3, he's not worth breeding. And I think to a large extent, I think it is probably a net good thing in terms of keeping some form of working ability existing in the breed, where in the German Shepherd breed, I would argue that most dogs don't have that working ability at all. So there's at least some of that coming in, but I think it's also maybe relied upon too much as a crutch, where people will think that just because a dog is an IGP3, that it's worth breeding, A, or B, that just because a dog doesn't have a title, it's not worth breeding. So my way of looking at it is that genetics are what makes the dog. The handler titles the dog, and the title doesn't make a good dog. It's just a title put on a dog. Some good dogs have titles, some not good dogs have titles. It gives you information, but it doesn't give you enough to be able to make a decision in and of itself. That would be the way that I would look at it. We're breeding Soul Leader, who is not a titled dog, to Indy, she has a BH, not a title, but she could be titled without a doubt. And so could Soul Leader. So talk to us a little bit about that. Why is this not an unethical breeding?
Well, there's a lot of things touched on there. You give me so many things to go on. I have a hard time to remember on each one.
I'm just pressing play.
Yeah, so the title doesn't mean you have a dog capable of it. I've seen a dog that's going to Worlds and has gone to Worlds, had really good training. I seen it as a young dog getting worked, and I thought it was shit. I was like, that is a fear dog that shouldn't be on the field. And it's going to Worlds. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it turned out better as it aged, but I think they had really good training, and it showed well. There's dogs that with the right judge, the right field at their home time, just the right trial, they get their titles. But I've seen in their score, I've seen like this is up here, but then I've seen a dog that's superior in every way. That's an actual strong working dog, take a lot longer to get a title. The score is much lower. And they're like, oh, this has a score of 96, and this dog has a score of 75. I'm like, yeah, that dog with 75 was a fucking powerhouse, and that was a really good dog. Or the other dog with the higher score was not so good, and it just had a good day with the right judge. So titles and points to me it's silly. You need to see that dog, and you need to see that dog off the field. You can have a dog that's really good, doing its routine, bring it into a warehouse and do some work on there, even if it's still IPO sleeve work, but just make it somewhere where it's uncomfortable and see how it works. When you're breeding a dog, these are all things that should be looked at and are often overlooked for some people. They just look at the title, as you say, they look at what the scoring is, and like, oh, that's it, I got 90 at Worlds, it must be good, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. That's something that should be tested by other people that know how to test dogs to do that. So
I bet
that
people
would,
actually ask me for the scores of the mother of one of my litters, to which I'm sort of like, what are you trying to get out of that? At the end of the day, the
yeah,
score on the dog is a reflection of the handler as much as it is the dog. And then
handler and trainer. You have a good
yeah,
trainer and a
handler and
good
trainer.
handler.
And it doesn't tell you really anything about the quality of the pups that are going to be put out. I mean, we had, just as an example, you've actually worked her, one of our previous dogs, Senta La Roja. So she was out of world famous dog, Cuvito, Vepiden. Grandfather was Chris Spodlazov, both WSV, excuse me, dogs. And she was as point dog as a point dog can be. She
Hmm.
had zero active aggression, and just we ended up getting rid of her just because she wasn't what we were looking for our breeding program. And
Oh
then
yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
I ended up hearing the same thing out of a sibling to Cuvito, a dog named Bordy Blendy. I heard from multiple people who bred that dog that they had the same issues out of the puppies, and both of those dogs were dogs that went to Worlds and that did very, very well at Worlds.
Yeah.
So, to talk to us a little bit about what you see as the difference between a sport dog, which, for the record, there's nothing wrong with people breeding sport dogs. They are an easier type of dog to handle, and a lot of people really will do better with a sport dog, if we're being very honest. But tell us what the difference is, in your view, between a sport dog and the type of dog that you're trying to breed in your kennel, we're trying to breed in our kennel, which is more of the working dog side of things. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of overlap. We need to say there's a lot of
Yeah.
overlap in those types of dogs.
Yeah. So I wouldn't even call it a sport dog. I would just say a very biddable, easy to handle dog because quote, Rex has a PH1 certification, we could say is a sport, but he can, is a very strong dog and he can do any application I think you put forward. Kick-Ass has a sporting dog title, IGP too, but, I could do any personal protection type scenario and she's nailed everything I throw at her. So I wouldn't say like sport dog. I just say often can be labeled as a more easy biddable dog. So, a good dog's a good dog. It can do sport or not do sport. So just to,
Let's say
I want to
let me clarify that. What I meant to say when
yeah,
I was sport dog was a point dog. So
gotcha.
talk to us.
I knew what you meant. I just wanted to
Yeah,
break it down so that
yeah,
it
fair
wasn't a thing later on.
enough.
Yeah. So yeah, a point dog, and again, it's good. Some people want that. Some people want a point type dog because their main goal is the sport, IGP or PSA or French ring, KBV, Mondial ring, etc. So they want a certain type of dog that's very biddable, easy to handle, and they can go to Worlds, they can title well, and that dog can do that well, and that is totally fine. Just not my thing. I want the dog that's probably never going to go to Worlds. You can get the title. It's a hard dog. You have to say no 1,000 times and it might test you on trial day. For me, that's better for worse. Maybe a breeding dog. I just like that dog that has that strong character, a little bit dominance. It wants to do what it wants to do. And I think that if we keep breeding very biddable dogs over and over and over, that after many generations, we will lose that natural aggression. And everything is just a game of, IPO or PSA. That dog views it as a game. And they could still maybe even do police work, but again, you water it down so much, and I don't know what the end result will be after 20 years of breeding that way. And so I think that you need to bring in some dogs that have that extra spice, that extra character, that are maybe not always going to be good on the field, because no matter what, they give you the finger on trial day. And those dogs usually are able to produce dogs that are able to do real world applications that can still do sport and everything like that with the right training. But if you have your bar set high, it's easy to, even if your litter doesn't come out exactly how you want it, they're still really good. But even if they surpass him, then that's even better. But if you start with your dogs down here, a quote unquote point dog, and they get even worse, then where does that go? They might
You're
get a
not
little
going to
bit
have
better, and that's good too.
dogs with the active aggression coming out of the
Yeah,
dog nearly as it's what we always say. Breeding dogs is a trip to the canine casino. We're always gambling
yeah,
in one way or
yeah,
another. What we're trying to do really is minimize the range of outcomes. And the
yeah,
way we minimize that range of outcomes, I look at breeding as always a deleterious process. So you're almost always going to come out with a little bit less than the dogs that went in. Some dogs are going to
mm,
come out, some dogs are going to come out even. The occasional one is going to come out better, and most are going to come out a little bit less than.
yeah.
And
Equal to or
so
less than, yeah,
yeah. And so I would in my view, the dog that is good for breeding for the breed is not necessarily always the dog that is good to own.
yeah,
The average person, and most of the time, the dog that is good to own is not worth breeding. I think those are fairly true statements. In
yeah. I
terms
think
of,
they are, and
sorry,
what
go
your
ahead.
goal is too.
Depending on what your goal is, if you're trying to
Yeah,
breed pet dogs,
yeah.
uh, then you shouldn't be breeding German Shepherds or Malinois, first of all.
Yeah, and I think with like the touch on the German Shepherd that you went on earlier again is they're looking at scores, they're looking at the title, which to me doesn't mean anything. And some sports like IGP keep getting a little easier all the time with every new name change, or they keep changing stuff to make it easier. Um, which I don't think they should, right? We should have a standard and that should be it. We shouldn't make it easier to get titles. We should make it harder to get titles so that we can get the dogs that can do all the athletics parts of it that we need them to do, and do everything else. Like removing the stick hit in IGP has kind of really left me sour. Me as a decoy, that's where I was really able to show the difference in 10 dogs that are lined up, is where I can put pressure on them. Some people have other parts they're really good at. For me, that's where I felt I shined, was when I did my drive. I could put that pressure on the dog with my stick and giving them the stick hits. I've seen dogs run off the field when I do it. Some dogs really change their grip and show they're insecure. And some dogs kind of growl at me and go, "Oh, you want to fight? You want to do it more, right?" And I'm like, that dog that's biting harder and kind of gives me that, like not a nervy growl, but like, okay, the game is on. That's the stud dog for me. That's the dog I'm looking for. That's bringing out that power. When I apply pressure to it, it fights back harder. Versus the ones that let go, run away, or just their grips change, or some that are like, you've just been really conditioned, but they don't have the heart in it. And removing the stick is definitely, for me, made it harder for someone to judge a dog, if it's good or not for breeding in that particular sport. So, that's another thing with that particular sport, and that's what primarily German Shepherds are in. Will definitely water down what you're seeing and what you're picking from.
I think that that's actually part of what. So you're actually the person who introduced me to the Teeker Hook bloodlines that we've now
Yeah.
had the very good fortune of taking on from Teeker Hook out of Holland. And from what I remember, that was one of the things that had impressed you. You'd either seen them or you had worked them, and
Yeah, there was one I had worked, and I just remember he ran into the blind. He was a young dog, and he was just like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah," like just jumping, barking at my face. And I got the feeling from him, like, if I had flinched, he might have grabbed my arm or something. I'm like, I like him. He had a little oomph to him. He just had a lot of drive, and he had a lot of, it seemed like, natural aggression. And he's a dog that you could put into something else besides IPO or IGP. You could do your KMPV with that kind of dog. You could do a PSA with that kind of dog. You could do police work, real world applications with that dog. It was different. It was different, and I liked it. And so I was like, when you asked me about German Shepherds, I'm like, I worked one I really liked, and that was him.
Yeah, and that set me off on the whole path. I went and found out everything I could about the bloodline, fell in love with it for the exact same reasons, and here we are today, 3 years
Yeah,
later, and we've brought in almost their entire breeding stock to Canada now, which is
it's
really
good.
thing. Yeah, it's nice to know that we're going to have some solid German Shepherds in Canada for at least a little bit longer, if nothing else.
Yeah,
I'm going to move on to something that is again, we talk purity tests. We've been talking purity tests for a little while now. One of the big ones is health testing. And
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that because what I want to get out right away, right up front, and you and I both, I think, are on the exact same page on this. A healthy dog is paramount in terms of the fact that we want to breed working dogs, and a dog that's not healthy is not going to work well. I think
Mhm.
where things might break down is in the areas of focus, where people look and what people choose to keep out of the gene pool and why. And so I want to get your thoughts on health testing, important or
Mhm.
not important, and how does it factor into your breeding decisions?
It's a touchy subject for some people. Having a healthy dog is obviously most important. Not most important, but it is important. That being said, X-rays are like something that is always done. I've done them and it's fine. But if you have a dog like Rex, we'll say, and say his one elbow is not perfect, do you throw that away because I can't find another one, or do you breed him to, we'll say, a female that is perfect X-rays, and then you check the X-rays of all their puppies and they're all perfect? Well, then it wasn't genetic. And often I have friends over in Europe that deal with a lot more Malinois in Holland and that, and they've been doing their X-rays for years, and the dogs that don't pass X-rays don't get bred, but still 4 generations later, multiple generations later, they have a dog that still doesn't pass an X-ray. So if it was just genetic only, then all the dogs should pass. If you're 4 or 5 generations deep with perfect X-rays, and then a litter has two that don't, well, maybe that's not really showing you everything. So sometimes some dogs that are very, very good are overlooked because of something didn't pass, even though their offspring pass. I've been on some breeding forums before, and I try to stay away from forums because they're silly, but there is some good information. And I seen someone that was breeding Newfies, and they had two perfect parents, and 8 out of the 10 dogs had dysplasia of some sort, even though the parents were perfect. And then they bred one dog that had like mild in the elbow, and all puppies were perfect. Shouldn't happen like that, right? If it was a perfect science, it would never happen like that. But I keep seeing it's not. It's not a perfect science. So yes, I do check, but if the dog is a tier 1 dog, showstopper, a Rex dog, and something's not perfect, I would still use him. I would just let people know, hey, this is him. I did an X-ray. This is the results. I don't know if it's environmental or from birth. I don't think it's from birth. I think it may be something else, but this is it. And I'm letting you know beforehand because I think he's worth breeding. And so as long as I'm honest and upfront about it, I think that's very fair. And if all the puppies have the same issue, well, then okay, maybe we don't breed them again. But if none of the puppies have the issue, well, then obviously it wasn't a genetic thing. And I know a dog in Holland I was very interested in, and apparently his X-ray was not good, but he was bred before that twice, and all the puppies from both litters are perfect. And he wasn't. So I don't know. If science was perfect, we'd have an exact answer, but you got a lot of people that will look up their nose at everyone else if they haven't done the exact same testing they have done, even if, again, some dogs that are being bred are maybe healthy, but I think they're not very good. I think that they're a nice pet that I would own, but not a working dog. Even if they had a title, some of the dogs I've seen that are using for breeding and they're healthy, but I don't think they have the right character um, for me to be bred for the Malinois or the German Shepherd, and they are. And sometimes some people are really good at social media, and some good people are really good at talking, and they sell these dogs very easily. It's not my strong shoot. Social media and being on camera is not my strong suit. So something I'm working on. But that some dogs I have that I thought is a pet quality dog, and I don't think it's that good, is better than the dogs that are being bred I've seen.
I think the way to think about it is that it's one factor among many other factors. And where
Yeah.
people get themselves into trouble is when they start thinking that breeding is a univariate situation where we're dealing with, one variable, and as long as the health testing is there, well, let's go, we're good to breed, right? Or if the health
Yeah.
testing isn't there, then we're not good to breed. And the fact of the matter is that if we're trying to breed for performance, for something specific, it just simply, it can't be that simple. It isn't that simple. And so I think the important thing is that, as you said, the x-rays are being done. It's not a
Mm,
matter of doing it, going into it blind. Solely just had his x-rays done. He's fine. It's not
mm,
a matter of going into it blind and not knowing, closing our eyes and plugging our ears and la 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 la. We're just going to stick two dogs together and hope everything turns out okay.
yeah.
Want to have as much information as you possibly can. If there's something wrong with the dog, whether genetic or not, you want to know about it because you want to be able to factor that into any decision that you're making. It just can't be as simple as this is one thing that isn't right, where 100 other factors are right, some of them
Yeah.
being even more rare, like that specific temperament that you're looking for is
Yeah.
incredibly rare, and it doesn't come
Tell
about.
me about
Oh, yeah.
it.
So if you find a dog that has that temperament, well, now you've got some decisions to make at that point. It's not a simple thing. And I think as a result of people thinking of it as being just a cut and dry thing, a lot of very good potential dogs are being held out of the gene pool as a result. I do want
Yeah.
to be clear. If this is not to say that, if you have something like DM where we know, if you breed an NDM dog with an NDM dog, you're going to get a bunch of NDM or you're going to get a bunch of DM puppies. So puppies that are actually expressing DM, those dogs should not be bred together, just full stop, right? Like there's certain things where you just make that decision where it's just like, we know exactly how the genetics work on that, and we're not going to go that route because we're not willing to produce a bunch of dogs that have DM,
Mm,
right? Whereas if you've got an NDM dog and you breed that dog with an NN, so it doesn't carry DM at all, you're going to have 0 dogs in your litter that are going to express DM whatsoever. And so there's no reason not to breed those two dogs together. But if you don't actually understand how those things work, you're going to end up making incorrect decisions. Is that fair?
yeah. Yeah. That's why I say when you brought it up, it's a touchy subject. A lot of people have their views on it and they talk to everyone else, but they some people are not open minded to even discuss the pros and the cons. It's just everything must be perfect, and if it's not, then get rid of it. And again, if you're looking for that unicorn dog, there's a bunch of factors that you need to put into place, and if they don't meet it, then they don't meet it. It's fine, but you have to put all the pluses and the minuses, and weigh that out before you make those choices. And just being over here is tough in Canada. Like, you've had to, and I've had to. We had to port our dogs over from Europe, which is a fucking fortune. And we're not in the place where you can go for a half-hour ride and go look at 10 different Malinois. It's just not possible. So we have to be really picky when we're picking the dogs we want to use to do that. So we put a lot of effort into getting the right dogs, but yeah, again, over here it's very, very difficult. There's more German Shepherds over here than Mals, but
Most of them are shit. So there are really
there's some good ones. There's some good
there's a
ones,
few.
but there's
There's a
also a lot of not good ones.
few.
Yeah,
So yes, it is a very touchy subject. I wanted to touch on it though because I think it's important. I think it's a really important subject that I think that we as working dog breeders need to be more comfortable speaking openly about, because
yeah,
it's not a matter of not doing the health testing. The health testing should absolutely be done.
mm,
Full stop. It's about how those results are interpreted. And I would argue that most people don't necessarily interpret or use the results in the way that or a lot of people, maybe not most, shouldn't,
yeah.
or in a way that they use the results in a way that they shouldn't necessarily be used.
Yeah, I think that's all really good information. And the biggest thing is I always keep an open mind because again, I see dogs that I think are pets, but they're working dogs and they're being bred. I don't care. I just say that's just not for me. That's not where I would get my dog from. And if someone's looking for like maybe a drivey pet, maybe I refer to them. You know, I'm not opposed to that. Everything has its place. It's just
I
there's a
agree.
lot of people out there that if they're not breeding the type of dog that they believe in, they shit talk everyone, and that's just something I'm not going to do. So I think that's a good takeaway is that you do everything, but you need to have open conversations with every other people, and not be so quick to jump to what they believe is the right dog. It should be an open conversation and go back and forth, an open dialogue. I think is definitely what we're doing now. Talking about these dogs is often seen if you look online is those dogs are shit. Those dogs are shit. But there's maybe a good place for them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. The open conversation when it comes to that is key. I can't think of a post that I put up online that got me more hate than the one that I put up that said that if the first thing that you're looking at when seeking a working dog is their health test, then you're looking at the wrong thing first, or something along
What
those.
can I say?
I,
Touchy subject.
I worded it a lot more gracefully in my post, but
Yeah.
yeah, we got a ton of hate. It was really misunderstood because it's
Yeah.
not to say that it doesn't matter at all. It's to say that when you're looking for a working dog, there are a lot of things to consider. One of those things is health testing, but
Yeah.
if the other things aren't there, then the health testing doesn't really matter. And if
Yeah.
everything else is there and the health testing isn't 100% perfect, well, maybe the health testing shouldn't matter as much there either if you're still going to get 8 or 10 good working years out of the dog that you're buying
Yeah.
for reasons.
Yeah.
Let's,
Again, it's always pros and cons with every dog. If you get a dog and he does everything perfect, but he's a little sketchy of maybe stairs, but everything else is perfect, but you can do a little bit of training with him and he's okay, then maybe he's good for working, right, and using. It's you got to look at everything with the dog, the nerve, the character, the grips, your environmentals, your recovery, your hunt. There's a long list of things to go down, and you got to chalk them up to make sure it's what you want. Some people want more hunt than other dogs, so they don't care about the grip as much, and some people want grip above all, hunt secondary, right? So these are all just pros and cons, and as a breeder, you just say this is what I'm breeding for. And if you like what I'm trying to produce, then these are the dogs for you. And if they're not, then there's other ones that are trying to produce what you are. So I think that's the biggest thing is just being really open with what you're trying to make. And it does always come out that way. When picking a puppy is the fucking hardest, most stressful thing because I'm trying to make sure the right puppy goes with the right person to make sure everyone's happy. But like a female I had in my last litter at 8 weeks old wasn't biting. She was 6 weeks old. She seemed very not so confident. 8 weeks old, she seemed very confident, but wasn't biting, wouldn't bite anything. I was like, maybe she's a good, fun pet. At 10 weeks, she's engulfing the sleeve, just full mouth. You can't get it out. She's like, oh, just eating the whole thing at 10 weeks. And, if I had sold her at 8 weeks and said, she's not going to bite, she won't do anything like that. And then she turns on, right? And so picking puppies is tough. You don't know what you have till about a year. And so I just let everyone know, like, they might change for better or for worse. And I hate picking them out. Usually pretty good at it, but that one definitely threw me a curveball.
there's a lot of science in breeding for sure, but
Mm.
it's an art, if we're being honest.
It's
It's an art
science.
that's bounded by science, is the way Stephanie and I talk about it.
I call it science, art, and luck.
Yeah. Yeah. The art part, I think, is where, not being an artistic guy, I'm just going by secondhand information here, but from what I understand, you're supposed to create art for yourself,
Yeah.
not what other people are going to think. And I think that really, when you're breeding, if you're breeding the type of mouths you like, I'm breeding the type of German Shepherds that I like. And at the end of the day, doing that is going to help us produce the best possible dogs that we can produce. And if other
Yeah.
people want to buy them, even better, because I don't have enough room for 25 German Shepherds. I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap, and it's
Perfect.
every ethical breeder's all-time favorite statement: adopt, don't shop.
Oh,
So
yeah.
every single we're gonna get them on this video, like without a doubt. We're gonna get comments of people who aren't gonna watch to this point, and they're gonna put something up about it. Every single video that I put up about breeding in any way ends up getting out, and somebody puts up a comment, stop breeding. There's enough dogs in shelters already. Adopt, don't shop. So the first thing that I want to say is all of you go fuck yourselves. Where the hell do you get off coming onto our pages and telling us to stop doing the thing that we've dedicated our lives to doing? But let's put that aside for a second. Why is that just completely misguided?
Their hearts are in the right place, but they don't think things through. Um, I own rescue dogs. I own a three-legged dog I brought back from Egypt. I still have my first dog I got from a shelter. Nothing wrong with adopting. Good thing about adopting a dog is that they're probably going to be over a year old or close to. So you kind of know what you're getting, and you just want a pet that's going to be your pet and your companion. You kind of what you're in for, its character, roughly. It's perfect. You want a dog that's been health tested. We know the lines of the dog, so we know the characters that should come out on it. If it's going to be more of a dominant dog, that's going to have a little bit of a natural aggression, and that's what we want in a dog. Well, we're not going to probably find that from the rescue. Really hard to find that. We want a dog with the certain characteristics we like as a dog that we want to own for the next 10 to 15 years. You're going to go to a breeder, and you're going to hope it's a good breeder that's putting the right dogs together, that's going to match you up with the right puppy, that's going to give you the dog that's going to make you happy for those years. Because also, if you want to do a little bit of sport work, you want to do some protection work, you want a protection dog, well, you're probably not going to get it from a shelter. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's just the percentages are against you, and it's much harder. That's why people in law enforcement are not going to go to shelters constantly to get dogs, even though it can happen. Don't get me wrong. They're going to go to a dog that's probably from a breeder or a vendor that's been raised, and you know what it is. Like, it's a strong dog. It's probably not the best pet. It's going to have the character that you want. So going to a breeder is essential if you want, the kind of dog you want, and they're going to match you up, and you're going to that breeder because, again, you, Jamie, breed the German Shepherd that I like. I like that German Shepherd. I like the way it works. I like the way it looks. It has all the character I want. I'm going to you because I'm not going to find that in the shelter. And even I look around, I'm probably not going to find it. So there's nothing wrong with adopting, and there's nothing wrong from getting a breeder. Both are good, and both should be out there. And as well as any good breeder like yourself and myself, I'll take back my dog. You have your dog for a bit. It's not so good. Circumstances turn against you. You lost your job. You lost your house. No problem. Bring her back. You know what I mean? Like, we'll take our dogs. Our dogs don't end up in shelters, so we're not part of the problem. We're actually preventing it.
I can't think of a bigger failure than if I were to learn that a dog that we produced ended up in a shelter. I would be gutted. I would probably drive to that shelter and get that dog out myself.
Yeah. I've always told everyone I'll bring him back. Just let me know. And if you're having some issues, maybe I can help you before you get there. Just be communicative. Just talk to me.
So just before we wrap, let's talk quickly about the Soul Leader Indie litter.
Yeah.
I decided that this would probably be an interesting pairing, that it could probably throw some good puppies. I've already given my thoughts on it a bunch of times. Curious to hear what you have to say about it. What are your thoughts? What are you kind of expecting? What are you hoping for? And we'll bound all of this by saying, as with all breeding, we don't know what we're going to get. We could get the best of both worlds. We could get the worst of both worlds. But I think given the dogs that we have, we've got a pretty good shot here. So I'm just interested to hear what you have to say about it.
I think, like in any breeding, unless they're really tight line breeding, you're going to have your top three and then your worst three, and that will vary. I think with these, both of them are good dogs. I think you'll get a ton of drive with these dogs. So you should get drive for days. You should be getting a good natural bite, good full natural grips. They should be pushing, maybe a little pulling with that shepherd in there. I can't fix that. That's something for a cat. I'm just giving you a hard time. I think they should be pretty confident dogs. I think they'll be dogs that can go to, police work or protection sport work, as well as I think you will have some in there that'll be good for like an active family that wants to, weekend warrior stuff. So I think you'll get a little bit of variety in there, but I do think the majority of the dogs should be confident, should have tons of drive, should be loud and barky, should have big stupid ears that you love. I think they should be
Not furry
environmentally
though. There
sound.
better not be any fucking long-coated German Shepherd Malinois.
Anything that I've had from down from Rex is I haven't seen personally or heard of personally having environmental issues. So we should see that. They should have good hunt. I think there's a lot of pluses in it. I think they'll be good dogs. There might be one or two dicks in it, but the rest should be pretty good and pretty fair. And I think they can do anything.
Yeah, I think
That's what we're hoping for.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think the hope is that Indy brings a bit of the German Shepherd thoughtfulness, where Soul Eater is going to bring sort of more of the Malinois forward aggression, and hopefully the rest of the traits combine. Again, we won't know what we get. We're gonna get a mix of everything, like you said.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is we've got two really solid dogs from extremely good old bloodlines.
Yeah.
It'll be
Yeah. Soul Eater's lines are old, man. Like all of his stuff and Rex's stuff is fairly Rex's grandfather was from 1990. So
yeah. And Koos, before he passed away, and we were able to bring in his dogs Nina and Zavi. He had been breeding German Shepherds for 50 years before that. So there's
yeah,
years worth
there's a
of
lot of thought in these lines.
There's a lot of thought. I don't even think people know the half of it, to be honest with you. So hopefully this conversation has served to shed a bit of light on some of the thought that goes into that. Is there anything before we wrap? Is there anything that I didn't hit on that you want to touch on?
No, I think you covered everything. Covered everything enough. I think that was good. I think that was good.
So why don't you tell people where they can find you, Complete Canine Care, and Fallen Star Bloodlines?
Yeah, CompleteCanineCare.ca is our training page. Fallen Star Bloodlines. We have a .ca.com. We have something, we don't use it. Just reach us on Facebook or Instagram at Fallen Star Bloodlines. Those are what we primarily use. Again, it's our hobby, so you can find us on there. And then Complete Canine Care is Facebook and Instagram as well. We're on there for all your dog needs, and breeding needs is the Fallen Star Bloodline.
Perfect. Well, look, thanks very much for taking the time. It was great to chat, and I will see
Yeah, as
you
always.
in a couple of weeks.
Two more, not this Saturday, next Saturday. I'll see you again.
Fight Club. We'll get Stupid Furry Ears on the suit again.
Yeah, he did fantastic last time, so I think we can do even more.
That's another dog out of Indy. So she's produced one so far. It's a sample size of one, but he's shaping up to be a good dog so far.
He's very nice. He's very, very nice.
Thanks a lot, Brent. Really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me, Jamie. Take care.
Great one.